Hey there! Grab yourself a coffee and enjoy the story. The cold silence of our empty apartment greeted me like an old enemy. James had left just 3 hours ago, his cologne still lingering in our bedroom, as if to mock my solitude. "I'll miss you, Em, but this conference in Chicago is important for my career," he'd said, kissing my forehead before wheeling his suitcase out the door. His business trips had become more frequent over the past year, each one stealing another piece of the marriage I once believed would last forever. I stood by the window, watching the afternoon sun cast long shadows across our neighborhood of identical townhouses. Another week alone, another canceled anniversary dinner, another night of falling asleep to the glow of my phone, waiting for a text that would come only after I'd given up and drifted into uneasy dreams. The house felt too quiet, too empty, a museum of a life I barely recognized anymore. Wedding photos smiled at me from the walls, capturing moments of hope and promise that now felt like artifacts from someone else's happiness. I ran my finger along the frame of our honeymoon picture, taken 9 years ago on a beach in Hawaii. James had still looked at me then, really looked at me. Not through me, or past me as he did now. "Enough," I whispered to myself, pulling my hair into a messy bun. If I was going to spend another week alone, I might as well make it productive. The apartment needed cleaning, and I had 32 book reports to grade before Monday. My third-grade students at Westlake Elementary were counting on me, even if my husband wasn't. I started in the bathroom, scrubbing away at the shower tiles with more force than necessary, as if I could somehow erase the growing distance between James and me with enough bleach and determination. The kitchen came next, wiping down countertops, organizing cabinets, and finally tackling the trash that James had forgotten to take out before leaving. As I lifted the bag from the bin, the bottom tore open, scattering coffee grounds, junk mail, and food wrappers across the freshly mopped floor. "Perfect," I muttered, kneeling to gather the mess. That's when I saw it. A crumpled pink paper among the debris, handwriting I didn't recognize flowing across its surface. My heart quickened as I smoothed out the note, a sense of foreboding washing over me before I'd read a single word. "James, I know you're planning to leave town tomorrow, but we need to talk tonight. You promised me you'd handle this weeks ago. If I don't hear from you by 8, I'm coming to your door and telling your wife everything. This isn't a game anymore. Sophia. Sophia." The name hit me like a physical blow. Our neighbor from 3 doors down. The quiet, elegant woman with the sad eyes who had moved in just 6 months ago with her young son. The woman who smiled politely when we passed in the neighborhood but never quite met my gaze. The woman whose son, Lucas, was now in my 3rd grade class. I read the note again, then a 3rd time, my hands trembling as I tried to make sense of the words. What had James promised her? What was he supposed to handle? And what secret was so important that she would threaten to reveal it to me? My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from James. "Landed safely. Hotel's nice. Miss you." The casual normalcy of his message made my stomach turn. I stared at the screen, wondering if I should confront him immediately or wait until I had more information. But what more did I need? The evidence of his deception was literally in my hands. No. I stopped myself from jumping to conclusions. There could be an innocent explanation. Perhaps it was about Lucas. James had mentioned helping the boy with a science project a few weeks ago. Or maybe it was something to do with the neighborhood association. James was the treasurer, after all. But the note didn't sound like it was about community landscaping or school projects. It sounded intimate, urgent, secret. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my pocket. Whatever was happening, I needed to approach this rationally. 9 years of marriage deserved more than a hasty accusation based on a cryptic message. The following morning, I arrived at Westlake Elementary earlier than usual, my mind still churning with questions about the note. The empty classroom offered a brief sanctuary from my troubled thoughts as I arranged desks and prepared the day's lessons on the whiteboard. Lucas Miller was the first to arrive, as he often was. He stood in the doorway, his small frame dwarfed by his oversized backpack, dark circles under his eyes that no 9-year-old should have. "Good morning, Lucas," I said, summoning a warm smile despite my inner turmoil. "Morning, Miss Richardson," he mumbled, shuffling to his desk without making eye contact. Lucas had always been a quiet child, but in recent weeks his withdrawal had deepened. His homework was often incomplete, his participation in class discussions minimal. I'd meant to call Sophia to discuss my concerns, but somehow the right moment never materialized. "How are things at home?" I asked gently, kneeling beside his desk. Lucas shrugged, tracing invisible patterns on his desk with his finger. "Fine, I guess. And your mom? Is she doing okay?" At the mention of his mother, Lucas's face clouded. "She's been crying a lot, and she has more doctor appointments now." Doctor appointments. The information landed with a dull thud in my consciousness. Was Sophia ill? Could that be what the note was about? Perhaps James was helping her navigate medical issues. He had connections at the city hospital through his insurance work. "I found some papers," Lucas continued unexpectedly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I wasn't supposed to see them, but they were in the cabinet, where Mom keeps my games." I waited, giving him space to continue. "They said I was adopted." His bottom lip quivered slightly. "Mom never told me." Why wouldn't she tell me something like that? The revelation struck me with unexpected force. Adopted. This quiet, solemn boy had discovered something that had shaken his entire sense of self, and he'd been carrying this knowledge alone. "Sometimes," I said carefully, "adults try to protect children by keeping difficult truths from them. It doesn't mean your mom loves you any less." "But she lied," Lucas insisted, a flash of anger brightening his usually dull eyes. "And now she's sick, and she still won't talk to me about it. She just says everything's going to be fine, but I know it's not." Before I could respond, the classroom door swung open as more students began to arrive. Lucas immediately shut down, pulling out his math book and pretending to review yesterday's lesson. Throughout the day, I found my attention divided between my teaching duties and the swirling questions about James, Sophia, and now Lucas. The note in my pocket seemed to burn against my skin, a tangible reminder of secrets being kept just beyond my understanding. After dismissal, I lingered in the classroom, ostensibly grading papers, but really trying to decide what to do next. Should I confront Sophia directly? Talk to James first? My phone buzzed with another text from my husband. "Conference running late. Going to dinner with the team. Talk tomorrow?" I didn't reply. Instead, I gathered my things and headed home, my steps slowing as I approached our neighborhood. To my surprise, I saw Lucas sitting alone on the playground swings, kicking listlessly at the wood chips below. "Lucas!" I called. "Is everything all right?" He looked up, relief washing over his face when he recognized me. "Mom's at the doctor again. I'm supposed to wait at Mrs. Jenkins' house, but she smells like cat food." I smiled despite myself. "Would you like to come to my place instead? I could help you with that science homework, and we could make some dinner." Lucas nodded eagerly, jumping off the swing and falling into step beside me. As we approached my townhouse, I saw Sophia's unit 3 doors down, dark and silent, her sleek black car absent from the driveway. Inside, Lucas settled at my kitchen table while I prepared a simple pasta dinner. There was something comforting about having another presence in the house, even if it was just a quiet 9-year-old with too many secrets weighing on his small shoulders. "My dad left when I was little," Lucas said suddenly, twirling spaghetti around his fork. "That's what Mom told me. But if I'm adopted, then the man in the pictures isn't my real dad, right?" I chose my words carefully. Family isn't always about who you're born to, Lucas. It's about who loves you and takes care of you. "But what if—" Lucas began, but was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. When I opened it, Sophia Miller stood on my doorstep, her face pale and drawn, dark sunglasses covering her eyes despite the evening hour. "Is Lucas here?" she demanded, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Mrs. Jenkins said he never showed up after school. He's having dinner," I explained, opening the door wider so she could see her son at the kitchen table. "I saw him waiting alone at the playground and thought—" "You had no right," Sophia interrupted, stepping past me into the apartment. "Lucas, get your things. We're leaving." "Mom, I was just—" "Now, Lucas." The sharpness in her voice made both Lucas and me flinch. As Lucas reluctantly gathered his backpack, I found my voice. "Sophia, I think we should talk." "There's nothing to talk about." She gripped Lucas's shoulder, steering him toward the door. "I found your note," I said quietly. "The one you wrote to my husband." Sophia froze, her hand still on Lucas's shoulder. For a moment, the only sound in the apartment was the ticking of the clock on the wall and Lucas's confused breathing. "Lucas," Sophia said finally, her voice unnaturally calm, "go wait for me by our door. I'll be there in 1 minute." Once Lucas was out of earshot, Sophia turned to me, removing her sunglasses to reveal reddened eyes. "Whatever you think is happening, you're wrong." "Then explain it to me," I challenged, pulling the crumpled note from my pocket. "Explain why you're threatening my husband. Why you need to tell me everything." "You wouldn't understand," she whispered, a tremor in her voice. "It's complicated. Try me." Sophia shook her head, replacing her sunglasses. "Just tell James I need to speak with him as soon as he's back. This isn't what you think, but it is important. More important than you know." With that cryptic statement, she turned and left, closing the door behind her with a quiet click that somehow felt more final than a slam. I stood in the silence of my apartment once more, the half-eaten dinner still on the table, the note still in my hand, and the certainty growing in my heart that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with possibilities, each more painful than the last. Was James having an affair with Sophia? Was he somehow involved with Lucas? What secret could be so important that it warranted such urgency, such fear? The phone rang at 11:30, startling me from my troubled thoughts. It was Margaret, my mother-in-law, her voice tense with worry. "Emily, dear, I'm at the hospital. My blood pressure spiked, and the neighbor called an ambulance. Would you mind terribly coming to sit with me? The doctors want to keep me overnight for observation." I dressed quickly, grateful for the distraction despite the circumstances. As I drove through the quiet streets toward City Memorial Hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow all of these separate threads, James's absence, Sophia's note, Lucas's adoption, and now Margaret's health scare, were connected in ways I had yet to understand. The fluorescent lights of City Memorial Hospital cast an eerie blue glow over Margaret's pale face as she lay against the stark white pillows. Despite her condition, my mother-in-law's sharp eyes missed nothing, including my distracted expression as I settled into the chair beside her bed. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Margaret observed, reaching for my hand. "And don't tell me it's just worry over an old woman's blood pressure." "I've known you too long, Emily." I forced a smile, squeezing her fingers gently. "It's nothing. Just teacher stress. 30 energetic third-graders can wear anyone down." Margaret's penetrating gaze told me she wasn't convinced, but she mercifully changed the subject. "James called earlier, said his conference is going well. Did he mention when he'd be back?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Sunday evening, same as planned." She adjusted herself against the pillows with a wince. "Though heaven knows what I'll do alone at home until then. These doctors are being ridiculously cautious." "I can stay with you," I offered, partly out of genuine concern and partly because I couldn't bear the thought of returning to the empty apartment with its walls of questions. Margaret patted my hand. "Sweet girl, you've always been too good for my son." The comment hung in the air between us, weighted with an implication I wasn't prepared to examine. Had Margaret sensed the growing distance between James and me? Did she know something I didn't? "He works hard," I said defensively. though I wasn't sure why I felt compelled to protect him, especially now. Too hard, if you ask me. Always in that study of his when he visits me, locked away with Richard's old files and papers. Margaret sighed, mentioning her late husband. I tell him, whatever you're looking for in there, it won't bring your father back, but he never listens. This was news to me. James works in your husband's study when he visits you, for hours sometimes. Says he's organizing Richard's affairs, but it's been 3 years since the funeral. How much organizing could possibly be left? Margaret's eyes drifted closed, the medication in her IV beginning to take effect. The safe, he's always in that safe. Her words slurred as she fell into medicated sleep, leaving me with yet another piece to the puzzle I couldn't quite fit. I spent the night in the uncomfortable hospital chair, drifting in and out of fitful sleep as nurses came and went, checking Margaret's vitals. By morning, my back ached and my mind was no clearer, but the doctor's report was positive. Margaret's blood pressure had stabilized, though they wanted to keep her another night for observation. Go home, dear, Margaret insisted when I offered to stay. Take a shower, grade some papers. I'm just going to sleep anyway. Reluctantly, I agreed, promising to return that evening with fresh clothes and her favorite book. As I drove toward her house to collect the items she'd requested, a plan began to form in my mind. If James was hiding something in Richard's study, something connected to Sophia and Lucas, perhaps the answers I sought were waiting in that room. Margaret's house sat on a quiet street, lined with mature oak trees, their branches creating a canopy of dappled shadows across the well-maintained lawn. I'd always loved this home, with its wraparound porch and comfortable lived-in feeling. It had been a refuge during the early years of my marriage, a place where family dinners and holiday celebrations created the sense of belonging I'd craved since losing my own parents in college. The key turned easily in the lock, and I stepped into the familiar foyer, immediately heading upstairs to pack Margaret's overnight bag. Once that task was complete, I stood hesitantly at the end of the hallway, staring at the closed door of Richard's study. I'd never entered the room without an invitation. Even when Richard was alive, the study had been his private domain, and after his death, it became something of a shrine. Margaret left everything exactly as it had been on the day he died. His reading glasses still perched on a stack of financial journals, his favorite pen lying uncapped beside the leather blotter. Taking a deep breath, I turned the brass doorknob and stepped inside. The heavy curtains were drawn, casting the room in shadow. I fumbled for the light switch, illuminating a space that smelled of leather, paper, and the faint trace of Richard's pipe tobacco that stubbornly clung to the furnishings even after 3 years. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss. The massive oak desk dominated the room, flanked by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes and family photographs. A worn leather armchair sat in the corner, beside a small table that still held a crystal tumbler, waiting for a drink that would never be poured. But as I looked more closely, I noticed subtle signs of disturbance. The desk drawers weren't fully closed. Papers protruded from folders that had been hastily replaced. And the painting behind the desk, a pastoral landscape Richard had bought on their 30th anniversary, hung slightly askew. Moving closer, I gently lifted the painting away from the wall, revealing a wall safe with its door slightly ajar. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled the heavy metal door open, uncertain of what I might find. Inside was a chaotic collection of documents, folders, and photographs. I removed them carefully, spreading them across the desk's surface, a sense of dread building as I began to examine their contents. The first folder contained newspaper clippings, all concerning the same story: the disappearance of a 5-year-old boy named Alexander Montgomery, son of wealthy businessman William Montgomery, who had vanished from his family's estate 7 years ago. The child's smiling face stared up at me from the articles, a boy with distinctive blue eyes and a small birthmark on his neck shaped like a crescent moon. The second folder held what appeared to be medical records for Lucas Miller, including a DNA analysis and several doctors' reports. Paper-clipped to these was a series of photographs of Lucas, taken from a distance, at school, at the playground, walking with Sophia. The clinical, surveillance-like nature of the images sent a chill down my spine. But it was the third folder that made my blood run cold. Inside was a detailed dossier on Sophia Miller, outlining her financial troubles, her medical history, including a recent diagnosis of stage 4 pancreatic cancer with a prognosis of less than 6 months, and a handwritten agreement signed by both Sophia and James. The agreement stated that in exchange for paying all of Sophia's medical expenses and providing a trust fund for Lucas's future care, she would present her adopted son as the missing Montgomery heir, with James serving as the finder, who would claim the substantial reward that William Montgomery had maintained for information leading to his son's recovery. My hand shook as I read further. According to the notes, James had meticulously researched the Montgomery case for years, originally as part of an insurance investigation. He'd discovered Sophia and Lucas by chance when they moved into our neighborhood, and he'd immediately noted Lucas's resemblance to the missing Montgomery boy. The same age, similar features, even the same blood type. What had begun as a coincidence had developed into an elaborate scheme. James would help Sophia falsify adoption records to make it appear she had adopted Lucas around the time Alexander went missing. Medical records would be altered to explain the absence of the distinctive birthmark. And when the time was right, James would discover the connection and bring Lucas to Montgomery's attention, claiming the $5 million reward that had gone unclaimed for 7 years. The plan was despicable in its calculated cruelty, exploiting a grieving father's desperate hope while using a dying woman's fear for her son's future as leverage. And my husband, the man I'd shared a bed with for 9 years, was the architect of it all. Bile rose in my throat as I continued reading. According to the most recent notes, dated just 3 days ago, the plan was in its final stages. James wasn't at a conference in Chicago. He was meeting with a forger to complete the falsified adoption papers. He would return on Sunday, and on Monday, he and Sophia would approach William Montgomery with their discovery. A sudden noise from downstairs startled me from my horrified trance. I froze, listening intently as footsteps moved across the foyer and began ascending the stairs. Quickly, I gathered the documents, shoving them back into the safe as my mind raced. Who could it be? Margaret was still in the hospital. The cleaning service wasn't scheduled until next week. "Hello?" a familiar voice called. "Mom? Are you home?" "James!" My heart hammered wildly as I pushed the safe closed and hurriedly rehung the painting. What was he doing here? He was supposed to be in Chicago until Sunday. Thinking fast, I grabbed Margaret's overnight bag and stepped into the hallway just as James reached the top of the stairs. The surprise on his face might have been comical under different circumstances. "Emily, what are you doing here?" I held up the bag, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Your mother's in the hospital. High blood pressure. She asked me to bring some things." James's face showed appropriate concern, though I now wondered if any expression he'd ever worn had been genuine. "The hospital? Why didn't anyone call me?" "I tried," I lied, "but it went straight to voicemail." "How was your conference?" A flicker of something? Guilt? Annoyance? Crossed his features before his expression smoothed into practiced neutrality. "It ended early. Some of the speakers canceled." He glanced toward the study door. "Were you in my father's study?" "Just looking for your mother's reading glasses," I said, amazed at how easily the deception came. Was this what our marriage had become? A contest of lies. She thought she might have left them in there last week. James seemed to accept this, though his eyes lingered on the study door a moment too long. "I should go see her." "Which hospital?" "City Memorial." "But James," I added, touching his arm, and hating myself for the performance I was putting on, "she's resting now. The doctor said no visitors until evening. Why don't you go home and rest? You look tired from your trip." To my relief, he nodded. "You're right. I could use a shower and a few hours of sleep. Will you be home later? I have some errands to run first. But yes. I moved past him toward the stairs, desperate to escape before my facade cracked. I'll see you at home. Instead of driving home, I found myself heading toward downtown, toward the Montgomery Building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that housed Montgomery Enterprises. I had no plan, no clear idea of what I would say or do when I arrived, only the burning certainty that I needed to stop this cruel deception before it went any further. The security guard in the lobby eyed me skeptically when I requested to see William Montgomery without an appointment, but something in my expression, perhaps the barely contained desperation, must have moved him, because he made the call. Mr. Montgomery's executive assistant will be down to meet you, he informed me after a brief conversation. Please wait over there. I paced the marble lobby for what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes before a crisp, professional woman in her 50s approached me. I'm Patricia Winters, Mr. Montgomery's assistant, she introduced herself. You wished to speak with him? Yes, I said, suddenly aware of how unprepared I was. It's about his son. About Alexander. The name acted like a key, unlocking doors that would normally remain firmly closed to someone like me. Within minutes, I was being escorted into a private elevator and whisked to the top floor of the building. William Montgomery's office occupied the entire northeast corner, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The man himself stood with his back to the door, gazing out at the skyline, a solitary figure framed against the vastness of the horizon. Mr. Montgomery will see you now, Patricia announced, closing the door behind me as she left. He turned slowly, and I was struck by the profound weariness etched into his face. Though impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, William Montgomery carried himself like a man burdened by weights too heavy to bear. Mrs. Richardson, he said, his voice deeper than I'd expected. Patricia says you have information about my son. I swallowed hard, suddenly understanding the magnitude of what I was about to do. Not just exposing my husband's scheme, but potentially reopening wounds that had never fully healed for this man. I'm afraid I have information about a fraud that's being planned against you. I began cautiously. A cruel deception involving a child who would be presented to you as your missing son. Montgomery's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. This wouldn't be the first such attempt, Mrs. Richardson. Unfortunately, the reward money attracts all manner of opportunists. This is different, I insisted. The people involved have gone to extraordinary lengths to make their story convincing. They've created false documents, altered medical records, and one of them is my husband. The admission cost me more than I could have imagined, as if speaking the words aloud made the betrayal more real, more final. Montgomery gestured to a chair. Please, sit down and tell me everything. And so I did. I told him about finding Sophia's note, about Lucas's revelation regarding his adoption, about the documents I'd discovered in Richard's study. I explained James's insurance connection to the original case, his methodical planning, and his exploitation of Sophia's terminal illness. As I spoke, Montgomery's composed facade gradually crumbled, revealing flashes of anger, disgust, and most painfully, a momentary flare of hope quickly extinguished by the reality of my story. And you had no knowledge of this plan? He asked when I finished, studying me with eyes that had seen too many deceptions to trust easily. None, I assured him. I only discovered it today. I came straight here. He nodded slowly, then pressed a button on his desk. Patricia, please contact our security team and legal department. I want a meeting in 30 minutes. To me, he added, these documents you described, we'll need them as evidence. They're in my mother-in-law's house, in the safe, but James is home now. I can't go back there without raising suspicion. Montgomery considered this. Our team can obtain a warrant, but it will take time, and if your husband suspects anything, he could destroy the evidence. He studied me thoughtfully. Would you be willing to help us secure those documents? The question hung in the air between us, a point of no return. If I agreed, I would be actively working against my husband, helping to build a case that could send him to prison. Yet if I refused, I would be complicit in allowing his scheme to continue, a scheme that would cause immeasurable pain to the man standing before me and irreparable damage to an innocent child. Yes, I said finally, I'll help you. As I left the Montgomery building an hour later, with a small recording device concealed in my purse and instructions to return to Margaret's house that evening, I felt a strange sense of clarity amidst the chaos of emotions. My marriage was over. Had been over long before I found Sophia's note, but perhaps I could still salvage something good from its wreckage. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent as I drove back toward our neighborhood, casting long shadows across the road ahead. I thought of Lucas, innocently caught in this web of adult deception, and of Sophia, whose desperate love for her son had made her vulnerable to James's manipulation. I thought of William Montgomery, who had spent 7 years searching for a child who might never be found. And I thought of James, the man I had once loved enough to promise forever, now revealed as a stranger I had never truly known. The evening shadows lengthened across our neighborhood as I parked my car in front of our townhouse. James's sedan sat in the driveway, confirming he was home. My heart hammered against my ribs as I gathered my courage and stepped out of the car. The weight of the recording device in my purse, a constant reminder of the choice I had made. The house was quiet when I entered. Too quiet. I called out, "James, I'm home," trying to keep my voice natural despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. "In the kitchen," he replied. I found him sitting at the island counter, nursing a glass of whiskey, his laptop open before him. He looked up as I entered, his face carefully composed into an expression of casual welcome that I now recognized as completely artificial. "How's Mom?" he asked, closing the laptop with a subtle movement that struck me as oddly protective. "Stable," I answered, setting my purse on the counter, conscious of the recording device inside. "The doctor thinks she can come home tomorrow if her blood pressure stays down." James nodded, taking another sip of his drink. "Good. That's good." He studied me over the rim of his glass. "You look tired, Em. Rough day?" The concern in his voice sounded genuine, and for a moment I almost faltered. How was it possible that this man, who could show such convincing tenderness, was the same person who had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to exploit a grieving father and a dying woman? It's been— I searched for words that wouldn't betray my knowledge. Unexpected. Something in my tone must have alerted him because he set down his glass and focused his full attention on me. "Is everything okay? Did something happen at school?" The opening was perfect, too perfect to ignore. "Actually, I had an interesting conversation with Lucas Miller today." I watched carefully as James's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, from concern to wariness. "Oh?" He told me he recently discovered he was adopted. I moved around the kitchen, ostensibly preparing to make tea, but really because I couldn't bear to stand still under his scrutiny. He found the papers in his mother's cabinet. Poor kid was pretty upset that she'd never told him. James's fingers tightened slightly around his glass. "That's unfortunate. Children should be told these things early, in age-appropriate ways." "I agree." I filled the kettle, keeping my back to him as I continued. "It made me think about Sophia. She's raising Lucas alone, and now this secret's out. It can't be easy for her." "No, I suppose not." His voice was careful, measured. I turned to face him, leaning against the counter. "Have you spoken with her recently? She seemed upset when I saw her earlier." A flash of alarm crossed his face before he controlled it. "Why would I have spoken with her?" "I don't know." I shrugged, feigning casualness. "You mentioned helping Lucas with a science project a while back. I thought maybe you kept in touch." James relaxed slightly, obviously relieved at what he perceived as my innocuous reasoning. "No, not really. Just neighborhood pleasantries when we run into each other." The lie hung in the air between us, joining all the other lies that had formed the foundation of our marriage in recent years. I wondered how long he had been deceiving me, and in how many ways. "I think I'll take a shower," I said, unable to maintain the charade any longer. "It's been a long day." James nodded, already reopening his laptop. "I'll be up in a bit. I have some work emails to finish." More lies, more deception. Each word from his mouth now felt like a betrayal, and I couldn't bear to hear another. In the bathroom, I turned the shower on full blast, allowing the sound of rushing water to mask my movements as I called William Montgomery's private number, which he had provided earlier. "He's home," I whispered when he answered, "but I need to get back to your mother's house to retrieve those documents." "Our team is standing by," Montgomery replied, his voice calm and reassuring. "Can you get away tonight?" I thought quickly. "Yes. I'll tell him I need to take some things to his mother at the hospital. He won't question that." "Be careful, Mrs. Richardson. If he suspects anything—" "He doesn't," I assured him, though I wasn't entirely certain. James had always been perceptive, and I wasn't used to deception. "I'll call when I have the documents." So, after a quick shower, I dressed in fresh clothes and applied a touch of makeup to disguise the pallor that stress had brought to my face. James glanced up briefly when I re-entered the kitchen, now dressed in sweatpants and one of his old t-shirts. "I need to take some things to your mom," I announced, grabbing my purse. "She wants her reading glasses and that mystery novel she started last week." James nodded absently, his attention already back on his laptop. "Tell her I'll stop by tomorrow." "Will do." I hesitated at the door, looking back at this man I had once loved so completely. In that moment, I almost wished he would look up, would say something to make me doubt what I knew, to offer some explanation that could salvage something from the wreckage of our life together. But he didn't look up, and I slipped out into the night with the weight of unspoken goodbyes pressing against my chest. The drive to Margaret's house took less than 15 minutes. I parked on the street, rather than in the driveway, a precaution against James deciding to check on his mother himself and noticing my car. The house was dark and silent as I let myself in, moving quickly through the familiar rooms to Richard's study. This time, I didn't hesitate at the threshold. I switched on the light, went straight to the painting, and opened the safe. The folders were exactly as I had left them, and I gathered them quickly, along with a USB drive I hadn't noticed earlier that was labeled simply Montgomery Case. Just as I was closing the safe, my phone buzzed with a text message. My blood froze when I saw James's name on the screen. "Where are you?" "Called hospital. Mom asleep. No visitors." My fingers trembled as I typed a response. "On my way there now. Just stopped for coffee." His reply was immediate. "Funny. Find what you were looking for in Dad's study?" My heart stopped. He knew. Somehow, he knew I had discovered his plan. Had he installed cameras? Had the security system alerted him? Or had my performance simply been less convincing than I'd thought? Before I could decide how to respond, my phone rang. James calling. I let it go to voicemail, frantically gathering the documents and shoving them into my bag. I needed to get out of the house before he arrived. I had just reached the bottom of the stairs when headlights swept across the front windows. James's car pulled into the driveway, blocking my own vehicle parked on the street. There was no escape in that direction. Thinking quickly, I moved through the kitchen and out the back door, cutting across the yard to the side gate that led to the neighboring street. The sound of the front door opening spurred me to move faster, even as I tried to stay quiet. "Emily!" James's voice carried through the house. "I know you're here. Your car's outside." I slipped through the gate and onto the parallel street, my pulse pounding in my ears as I dialed Montgomery's number with shaking fingers. "He's here," I whispered when he answered. "He knows I found the documents. I'm on foot, trying to get away." "Where are you exactly?" Montgomery's voice was tense but controlled. I gave him the address of the house I was currently passing, clutching the precious folders to my chest as I continued walking briskly, afraid to run and draw attention. "Stay on the line. I'm sending a car to that location now." It should be there in less than 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes felt like an eternity as I moved through the quiet residential streets, constantly glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see James's car at any moment. When a sleek black sedan pulled alongside me, I nearly bolted before the window lowered, and a professionally dressed woman leaned out. "Mrs. Richardson? Mr. Montgomery sent us." I practically fell into the back seat, relief washing over me as the car pulled away from the curb. "Thank you," I breathed, finally allowing my hands to relax their death grip on the folders. "We'll take you directly to Mr. Montgomery," the driver informed me. "He's waiting at his office." As we drove through the darkening city, I tried to process everything that had happened in the span of 24 hours. My entire life had imploded. My marriage revealed as a sham. My husband exposed as someone capable of extraordinary cruelty and deception. And yet, amidst the devastation, I felt an odd sense of purpose, a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. The Montgomery building was mostly dark when we arrived, save for the top floor where lights still blazed from William Montgomery's office. Security escorted me directly to the private elevator, and moments later, I was once again standing before the man whose tragedy had become intertwined with my own. "You're safe," he said, the statement somewhere between a question and a confirmation. I nodded, placing the folders and USB drive on his desk. "These are everything I found. There may be more at our apartment, but you can't go back there," he finished for me. "No, of course not. Not now that he knows you've discovered his plan." Montgomery gestured to a seating area where Patricia, his assistant, waited along with a serious-looking man in an expensive suit who was introduced as Daniel Weber, head of Montgomery's security team, and a woman named Rachel Garfield, his personal attorney. "We've been reviewing the situation," Montgomery explained as I took a seat. "Based on what you've told us and these documents, we have enough to involve the authorities. Mr. Weber has contacts in the police department who can handle this discreetly." "What will happen to James?" I asked, surprised to find I still cared about the answer. "If these documents are authenticated, he'll face serious charges," Rachel Garfield replied. "Fraud, conspiracy, possibly extortion. And there may be other victims we don't know about yet." The thought made me feel physically ill. Had there been other schemes, other deceptions I had failed to notice throughout our marriage? "And Sophia?" I questioned. "She's dying. She was manipulated by James, using her fear for her son's future." Montgomery's expression softened slightly. "We'll take that into consideration. If she cooperates fully, it's possible arrangements could be made to ensure her remaining time is comfortable and her son is provided for." "Lucas is innocent in all this," I insisted. "He's just a child who's already discovered he's adopted. He doesn't deserve any more trauma." "No child does," Montgomery agreed, a shadow of old grief crossing his face. "We'll do everything possible to minimize the impact on him." Chutti. As the others discussed legal strategies and next steps, I found myself staring out the window at the city lights spread below us like a carpet of stars. Somewhere out there, James was probably looking for me, furious that his carefully constructed plan was unraveling. Somewhere, Sophia was perhaps sitting by her son's bedside, watching him sleep, wondering how much time they had left together. And somewhere, perhaps, a little boy with a crescent moon birthmark was living a life completely unaware of the desperate search that had been ongoing for 7 years. My phone buzzed again. Another text from James. "We need to talk. Come home. Don't do anything stupid." I showed the message to Montgomery, who frowned. "Don't respond. In fact, it might be best if you turned off your phone entirely. He could potentially track your location." As I powered down my phone, Patricia approached with a cup of tea and a sympathetic smile. "Mr. Montgomery has arranged a suite for you at the Cartwright Hotel. Security will escort you there when you're ready. It's registered under a different name, so your husband won't be able to find you." The kindness of these strangers, in contrast to the betrayal of the man I had trusted most in the world, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I managed, accepting the tea with slightly trembling hands. Montgomery settled into the chair across from me. "Mrs. Richardson." "Emily, please." He nodded. "Emily, I want you to know how deeply I appreciate what you've done. Coming forward couldn't have been easy. Betraying one's spouse never is, even when that betrayal is justified. I didn't do it for appreciation," I said quietly. "I did it because it was right. Because what James planned to do was cruel beyond measure. To you, to Lucas, even to Sophia in his exploitation of her illness. Nevertheless, you showed remarkable courage." Montgomery's gaze drifted to a silver-framed photograph on his desk. A smiling woman holding a toddler with bright eyes and a mischievous grin. When Alexander disappeared, my wife couldn't bear it. She died 6 months later, officially heart failure. But really, it was grief that killed her. Since then, I've dedicated my life to finding our son, following every lead, investigating every possibility, no matter how remote. The raw pain in his voice made my own troubles seem somehow smaller in comparison. "I'm so sorry. The hardest part," he continued, "isn't just the not knowing. It's the hope. Every time a new lead emerges, there's that moment of possibility. Could this be it? Could this finally be Alexander? And when it inevitably proves false, it's like losing him all over again." I thought of the cruelty of James's plan, of how it would have exploited that precise hope, nurturing it only to ultimately destroy it when the deception was eventually discovered. "I can't imagine your pain, but I promise you this. If there's anything more I can do to help find your son or to bring James to justice, I will." Montgomery studied me thoughtfully. "What will you do now, after all this is resolved?" The question caught me off guard. In the chaos of discovery and escape, I hadn't had time to consider my future beyond the immediate crisis. "I don't know," I admitted. "I can't go back to my apartment, obviously. My job at the school, I'm not sure I can face Lucas every day, knowing what I know." "You could take a leave of absence," he suggested. "Give yourself time to process everything. My foundation has connections with several private schools, if you decide you need a fresh start." The offer was generous, but the thought of leaving my students mid-year troubled me. They deserved consistency, especially Lucas, who would soon be facing even more upheaval in his young life. "I need to think about it," I said finally. "Right now, everything feels too unsettled to make long-term decisions." Montgomery nodded in understanding. "Of course, but please know the offer stands whenever you might need it." Our conversation was interrupted by Weber, who approached with a concerned expression. "Sir, we've just received word that James Richardson has arrived in the lobby. He's demanding to speak with his wife, claiming she's been kidnapped." My stomach dropped. "How did he know I was here?" "He likely made an educated guess based on your earlier visit," Weber replied. "Security has denied him entry, but he's becoming increasingly agitated." Montgomery's expression hardened. "Have security detain him. Contact Detective Phillips. He should be waiting for our call. It's time to end this." As Weber moved away to make the necessary arrangements, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The confrontation I had been dreading was about to happen, but at least I wouldn't face James alone. "Would you like to go to the hotel now?" Montgomery asked gently. "You don't need to be present for this." I considered the offer, tempted by the prospect of escape. But running away had never been my nature, and I wouldn't start now, not when the truth was finally coming to light. "No," I said, squaring my shoulders. "I need to see this through." Montgomery's approval was evident in his slight nod. "Very well, but you'll remain here, in my office. Let the professionals handle James." 20 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and James was escorted into the office by 2 security guards and a plainclothes detective. His eyes widened when he saw me sitting beside Montgomery, the incriminating folders spread across the coffee table between us. "Emily," he said, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. "What have you done?" The simple question contained multitudes: accusation, betrayal, shock that his carefully constructed facade had finally crumbled. I met his gaze steadily, finding strength I hadn't known I possessed. "I discovered the truth," I replied quietly. "About you, about your plans for Lucas and Mr. Montgomery. It's over, James." He looked from me to Montgomery, calculation replacing shock as he assessed the situation. "Whatever she's told you, it's not what it seems. There's been a misunderstanding." Montgomery's expression remained impassive. "We have the documents from your father's safe, Mr. Richardson. We have the agreement you made with Sophia Miller. There's no misunderstanding." James's facade cracked then, revealing a glimpse of the cold, calculating person who had been hiding behind the mask of my husband. "You had no right to go through my things," he snarled at me. "Those were private documents." "Private evidence of fraud," the detective interjected, stepping forward. "James Richardson, I'm Detective Phillips. I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, and falsification of documents." As the detective recited the Miranda rights, I watched James's face, searching for some sign of remorse, some indication that the man I had loved still existed somewhere beneath the stranger before me. But all I saw was rage and calculation, a mind already working on his next move, his next deception. When they led him away, he didn't look back at me once. 9 years of marriage, and he couldn't spare a single glance for the woman who had once promised to stand by him forever. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that whatever love had once existed between us had died long ago, killed not by my discovery of his scheme, but by his own choice to become someone capable of such callous cruelty. As the elevator doors closed behind them, I exhaled slowly, feeling as though I'd been holding my breath for years. A chapter of my life had just ended, painfully, irrevocably, but as I sat in the quiet aftermath, I realized that another was already beginning. Dawn was breaking over the city as the black sedan delivered me to the Cartwright Hotel, its golden light painting the glass skyscrapers in hues of amber and rose. I hadn't slept, hadn't even tried. The events of the previous day replayed in my mind like scenes from someone else's life. Finding the note, discovering the documents, James's arrest. It felt simultaneously distant, as if it had happened years ago, and immediate, the emotions still raw and bleeding. The hotel suite Montgomery had arranged was larger than our entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the awakening city. I stood before the glass, watching the world come alive below me, feeling strangely disconnected from the ordinary rhythms of life continuing undisturbed. My phone, which I had turned back on once security assured me James couldn't track me, buzzed with a text from Margaret. Concern flooded through me. No one had thought to tell her that her son had been arrested, that her daughter-in-law had been the one to turn him in. "Emily, dear, where are you? The hospital released me early. I'm home now, but your car is still outside and James isn't answering his phone. Is everything all right?" How could I possibly explain what had happened? This woman who had welcomed me into her family, who had been more mother to me than my own had ever been, would now have to face the public humiliation of her son's crimes. The thought of causing her more pain after her health scare seemed unbearably cruel. And yet, she deserved the truth, however painful. I called her, my heart hammering as the phone rang once, twice, 3 times before she answered. "Emily, thank goodness. I've been so worried." "Margaret," I began, my voice catching. "I'm safe, but something's happened. Something serious. I'm not sure how to tell you this. It's about James, isn't it?" Her voice was suddenly older, wearier. "What has he done?" The question surprised me. Not "what's happened," but "what has he done?" As if she had been expecting this call for years, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Slowly, carefully, I explained everything. Finding Sophia's note, discovering the documents in Richard's study, James's elaborate scheme to defraud William Montgomery, and finally, his arrest the previous night. Throughout my explanation, Margaret remained silent, her breathing the only indication she was still on the line. When I finished, the silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken grief. "I should have seen it coming," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. Richard always said James was too clever for his own good, too focused on shortcuts to wealth. After Richard died, I noticed money missing from accounts. Documents moved in the study. I confronted James, but he always had explanations, and I wanted so badly to believe him. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Oh, my dear girl," Margaret sighed. "You haven't hurt me. James did that all on his own. You were brave enough to do what was right, even knowing what it would cost you. I'm proud of you, Emily." Her words, so unexpected, broke something open inside me, a dam of emotion I had been holding back since finding that first note in the trash. I sank onto the plush hotel sofa, sobbing as the full weight of everything I had lost finally crashed over me. "Where are you staying?" Margaret asked when my tears had subsided. "You shouldn't be alone right now." "Mr. Montgomery arranged a hotel room for me," I explained, wiping my eyes. "I couldn't go back to the apartment." "Nonsense. You'll come stay with me. This family has already caused you enough pain. The least I can do is give you a safe place to land while you figure out your next steps." The offer touched me deeply. Despite everything that had happened, despite my role in her son's arrest, Margaret still considered me family. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely certain. This house is too big for just me anyway. And," she added with a hint of her usual pragmatism, "it would be helpful to have someone nearby in case my blood pressure acts up again." We arranged that I would come to her house that afternoon, after I'd had a chance to rest. As I hung up, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying lifted slightly. I wasn't completely alone in this new, uncertain reality. I showered, changed into the clothes Patricia had thoughtfully provided, and finally allowed myself to lie down. Despite my certainty that sleep would be impossible, exhaustion claimed me almost immediately, pulling me into a deep, dreamless rest. When I awoke, the digital clock on the bedside table read 2:15 in the afternoon. I had slept for nearly 8 hours, yet still felt weighted with fatigue, the emotional kind that no amount of sleep could fully dispel. A text message waited on my phone from an unknown number. "This is William Montgomery. Detective Phillips would like to speak with you this afternoon regarding your statement. Please call when you're available." Reality crashed back, reminding me that the nightmare wasn't over. James's arrest was just the beginning of what would likely be a long, painful legal process. And then there was Sophia, who still didn't know that her desperate plan had been exposed, and Lucas, who remained innocent of the adult machinations swirling around him. I called Montgomery, who answered immediately. "Emily, I hope you were able to get some rest." "Yes, thank you. The hotel is lovely." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "Your message mentioned Detective Phillips?" "Yes. He needs your formal statement. I can arrange for him to meet you at my office, if that would be more comfortable than going to the police station." "That would be better," I admitted. "I'm planning to stay with my mother-in-law for a while. She's offered me a place until I figure things out." There was a brief silence on the line. "Are you sure that's wise? James's mother might not be entirely objective about the situation." "Margaret understands more than you might think," I explained. "She suspected something was wrong for a while. And honestly, we need each other right now." "I understand." His tone softened. "There's something else you should know. Sophia Miller was brought in for questioning this morning. She's cooperating fully with the investigation." My heart sank. "And Lucas?" "Currently with child services. Given his mother's medical condition and her involvement in the fraud, they're assessing the situation." The thought of that solemn little boy in the sterile environment of the state system made my chest ache. "He's my student," I said. "He trusts me. Is there any way I could see him, just to make sure he's okay?" "I'll see what can be arranged," Montgomery promised. "In the meantime, can you come to my office around 4 for the detective's statement?" I agreed, and after freshening up, I made my way downstairs where a car Montgomery had arranged was waiting to take me to his building. The city passed in a blur outside the windows as I mentally prepared myself to relive the events of the past 24 hours in official detail. Detective Phillips was waiting in Montgomery's office when I arrived, a compact man with intelligent eyes and a reassuringly calm demeanor. For the next 2 hours, I recounted everything, starting with finding Sophia's note and ending with James's arrest. The detective recorded my statement, occasionally asking for clarification, but mostly allowing me to speak uninterrupted. "You've been extremely helpful, Mrs. Richardson," he said when we finished. "Based on the evidence and Mr. Richardson's own incriminating statements during his interview, we're confident in the charges." "What happens now?" I asked. "Your husband is being held without bail, given the seriousness of the charges and the risk of flight." "Ms. Miller has been released to home confinement, considering her medical condition." His expression softened slightly. "I understand you're concerned about her son." I nodded. "Lucas is caught in the middle of all this, through no fault of his own. He's already struggling with finding out he's adopted. Now his mother is ill, and he's separated from her. It's too much for a 9-year-old to bear." Detective Phillips exchanged a look with Montgomery. "There may be a way you can help. Lucas is having difficulty adjusting to temporary placement. He's asking for his teacher, you. If you're willing, you could serve as a familiar presence during this transition." "Of course," I said immediately. "Whatever he needs. I'll let Child Services know. They can arrange a supervised visit as early as tomorrow." After the detective left, Montgomery offered me tea, which I gratefully accepted. We sat in his office as the afternoon light began to fade, the city transitioning from day to evening beyond the windows. "You've handled all of this with remarkable grace," he observed, studying me over the rim of his cup. I smiled ruefully. "I'm not sure grace is the right word. I'm just trying to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Sometimes that's all any of us can do." He set down his cup, his expression becoming more serious. "Emily, there's something I'd like to discuss with you, if you feel up to it." "Of course. It's about Lucas." Montgomery leaned forward slightly. "I've been thinking about his situation. With his mother's illness and her legal troubles, his future is uncertain at best. The system isn't kind to children in his position." I nodded, a knot forming in my stomach. "I've been worried about that too. I have resources, connections that could help ensure he doesn't get lost in the system. But he needs an advocate, someone who knows him, who has his best interests at heart." Montgomery's gaze was direct, penetrating. "Someone like you." "Me?" I blinked in surprise. "I'm his teacher, yes, but I'm hardly in a position to—" "You're exactly in the right position," he interrupted gently. "You know him as a student. You've seen his mother's desperation and understand the circumstances that led to this situation. And most importantly, he trusts you." "What exactly are you suggesting?" "Nothing definitive yet, just that you consider taking a more active role in advocating for his welfare as this situation unfolds. My foundation has programs for children in crisis, educational support, psychological services, placement assistance. We could ensure Lucas receives the best possible care, with your guidance." The offer was unexpected, but not unwelcome. In the chaos of the past day, my concern for Lucas had been a constant, a focal point amidst the swirling uncertainty of my own situation. "I would need to speak with Sophia first," I said finally. "Despite everything, she's still his mother, and she loves him deeply. That much I'm certain of." Montgomery nodded. "Of course. Detective Phillips mentioned she's asking to speak with you anyway. It could be arranged, if you're willing." "I am." Despite the role Sophia had played in James's scheme, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. She was a dying woman desperate to secure her son's future, manipulated by my husband's false promises and her own fear. We arranged that I would visit Sophia the following day, after seeing Lucas. As Montgomery's driver took me to Margaret's house, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed in the span of 48 hours. I had lost my husband, my home, and my sense of security. Yet somehow, I didn't feel diminished. Instead, I felt a curious sense of purpose taking root, a determination to help Lucas navigate the storm that had engulfed his young life, just as I was navigating my own. Margaret was waiting on the porch when I arrived, wrapped in a cardigan despite the mild evening. She embraced me tightly, her familiar scent of lavender and tea bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. "There you are," she said, drawing back to study my face. "You look exhausted, dear. Come inside. I've made dinner." The house that had once felt like a second home now carried new shadows, new meanings. As we passed Richard's study, the door now firmly closed, I couldn't help but think of the secrets it had contained, the evidence of James's betrayal that had shattered so many lives. "I've prepared the blue guest room for you," Margaret said, leading me upstairs. "Take some time to settle in, and then join me for dinner when you're ready. No rush." The blue room had always been my favorite, peaceful and cool, with a window seat overlooking the garden. Someone, Margaret or perhaps the housekeeper, had placed fresh flowers on the dresser and turned down the bed invitingly. I unpacked the few belongings I had with me, changed into more comfortable clothes, and made my way downstairs to the kitchen where Margaret was setting the table. "Nothing fancy," she apologized, placing a casserole between our plates. "My cooking skills are limited at the best of times, and today has been challenging." "It looks wonderful," I assured her, taking a seat. "Thank you for doing this." "For everything." We ate in companionable silence for a while, both too emotionally drained for small talk. Finally, Margaret set down her fork and looked at me directly. "James called from jail," she said quietly. "They allowed him one phone call, and he used it to speak to me." My stomach clenched. "What did he say?" "He asked me to post his bail, which isn't even an option since he's being held without it. Then he tried to convince me that this was all a misunderstanding, that you had somehow misinterpreted innocent documents and turned them against him." She shook her head sadly. "Even now, he can't bring himself to admit what he's done." "I'm sorry," I whispered, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. "This must be so painful for you." "Do you know what's truly painful?" Margaret's eyes, so like her son's in color but so different in their warmth and honesty, held mine. Realizing that I failed as a mother, that somewhere along the way I raised a man capable of such calculated cruelty. "You didn't fail," I insisted. "James made his own choices. You can't blame yourself for that." She smiled sadly. "That's kind of you to say, but a mother knows. There were signs, small things at first. The way he would manipulate situations to his advantage, even as a child. How he never seemed to feel genuine remorse when caught in a lie. Only frustration at being discovered." She sighed deeply. "Richard saw it more clearly than I did. He tried to instill stronger ethics, stricter boundaries, but after he died, James had free rein." The conversation turned to more immediate concerns. My statement to the police, my planned visits with Lucas and Sophia the next day, the practical matters of retrieving my belongings from the apartment I had shared with James. "We'll go together," Margaret decided, when I mentioned needing clothes and personal items. "The police said the apartment isn't considered a crime scene, so there's no reason we can't collect your things. James certainly won't be needing his half of the closet anytime soon." Her matter-of-fact approach to the situation was strangely comforting. Where I had expected judgment, or at least ambivalence about her loyalty in this impossible situation, Margaret had chosen me without hesitation. It was a gift I hadn't anticipated, but deeply appreciated. That night, in the peaceful blue room, I slept more soundly than I had in months. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was the first tentative step toward a new life, one built on truth rather than deception. Morning brought a call from Child Services, confirming my visit with Lucas at 10 o'clock. I dressed carefully, wanting to project calm stability for a child whose world had been turned upside down. Margaret insisted on driving me, claiming she needed errands in that part of town anyway, though I suspected she simply didn't want me facing this alone. The Family Services Center was housed in a modern building designed to appear friendly and non-institutional, with colorful murals and comfortable seating areas. I was led to a room clearly intended for family visits, toys arranged on shelves, child-sized furniture, observation windows discreetly positioned for supervision. Lucas was already there, sitting at a small table with a half-finished puzzle before him. He looked up when I entered, his face lighting with recognition and relief. "Miss Richardson!" He scrambled to his feet, and, in a move that surprised both me and the social worker observing, threw his arms around my waist in a tight hug. I knelt to his level, returning the embrace. "Hey, buddy. I've missed you at school. Where's my mom?" he asked immediately, his dark eyes searching mine for answers. "They won't tell me anything except that she's sick and can't take care of me right now. But that's not true, is it? She takes care of me even when she's sick." The innocent question pierced my heart. How could I possibly explain the tangled web of adult deceptions that had led to this moment? "Your mom is still sick," I said carefully, leading him back to the table. "And right now, there are some grown-up problems she needs to sort out. But she loves you very much. That's one thing I know for sure." Lucas's shoulders slumped. "Is it because I found out I'm adopted? Is she mad at me?" "No, absolutely not," I assured him, taking his small hands in mine. "This has nothing to do with you finding those papers. None of this is your fault, Lucas. Not one bit." He looked down at our joined hands, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I want to go home." "I know you do," I said, fighting back tears. "And I'm going to do everything I can to help make that happen. But in the meantime, I'll visit you as often as they let me. Would that be okay?" He nodded, a ghost of a smile flickering across his face. "Will you help me finish this puzzle? It's really hard." "Of course I will." We spent the next hour piecing together the puzzle, a complex underwater scene with vibrant fish and coral formations. Lucas gradually relaxed, sharing small stories about the group home where he was staying, the other children there, the social worker who had given him a stuffed dinosaur when he couldn't sleep. When it was time for me to leave, he clung to me briefly before the social worker gently separated us. "You'll come back, right?" he asked, uncertainty clouding his expression. "As soon as they let me," I promised. "And Lucas, if you need anything at all, you tell your social worker to call me, okay?" He nodded solemnly, and as I walked away, I heard him say to the social worker, "That's my teacher. She always keeps her promises." The simple faith in his statement strengthened my resolve. Whatever happened next, I would not let this child down. My next destination was across town, the modest apartment complex where Sophia Miller lived under house arrest, her medical condition deemed too precarious for jail. Margaret waited in the car, offering quiet encouragement before I stepped out. "Remember," she said, squeezing my hand, "whatever happened, she's still a mother fighting for her child. That's something worth honoring, even now." A police officer was stationed outside Sophia's door, checking my identification before allowing me entry. 30 minutes, he instructed. "She's had treatments today and tires easily." The apartment was small but meticulously kept, with photographs of Lucas lining the walls. Lucas as a toddler, Lucas on his first day of school, Lucas blowing out birthday candles. A life documented with love, regardless of how it had begun. Sophia sat on the couch, a colorful scarf wrapped around her head, highlighting the hollow cheeks and sunken eyes of someone battling terminal illness. She looked up as I entered, surprise and then resignation crossing her face. "I didn't think you'd actually come," she said, her voice stronger than her fragile appearance suggested. "I wanted to hear your side," I replied, taking a seat across from her. "I think I owe you that much." Sophia studied me for a long moment before speaking. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she began. "When I adopted Lucas 6 years ago, he was 3. abandoned, frightened, with no records except a first name and approximate age. The adoption agency couldn't tell me anything about his birth parents. She gestured to the photographs surrounding us. I gave him everything I could. A home, stability, love. Then last year, I got the diagnosis. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Terminal. I have months, not years. Her voice wavered slightly before she steadied it. My only concern was what would happen to Lucas after I was gone. No family, minimal savings, no one to care for him. That's when James approached you, I prompted gently. Sophia nodded. He said he'd noticed Lucas's resemblance to a missing child, the Montgomery boy. Said he had connections to the family through his insurance work. At first, I thought he was genuinely trying to help. Reuniting a lost child with his family would have been a miracle. But that wasn't his real intention, I said. No. Bitterness crept into her tone. Once he had my attention. He revealed his true plan. He'd help me prove Lucas was Alexander Montgomery in exchange for a percentage of the reward money. Enough to pay for experimental treatments overseas, with a trust fund left for Lucas. She looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap. I knew it was wrong. But when you're dying and terrified for your child's future, your moral compass shifts. All I could think was that the Montgomerys were wealthy. They would give Lucas a good life, and the money would secure his future even if they discovered the truth later. You were desperate, I acknowledged. James exploited that. He orchestrated everything, Sophia confirmed. The false documents, the altered medical records, the story we would tell. He even coached Lucas indirectly, asking casual questions about his earliest memories, seeing what might align with Alexander's life. She looked up at me, eyes glistening, but I was the one who agreed to it. I can't blame him entirely. Has Lucas ever shown any signs of remembering a life before you? I asked, thinking of the missing Montgomery child. Sophia shook her head. Nothing concrete. Occasionally he has nightmares about fire, but the psychologist said that's common in adopted children. Manifestations of abandonment anxiety, not necessarily memories. Fire? I repeated, a chill running through me. What kind of fire dreams? He says he's trapped somewhere dark and hot, with smoke. Someone carries him out, but he can't see the person's face. Sophia shrugged slightly. The adoption agency mentioned he might have been in a building fire before entering the system, but there were no records to confirm it. The detail nagged at me, but before I could pursue it further, Sophia leaned forward, urgency in her voice. Emily, I need to know. What's going to happen to Lucas? They won't tell me anything. He's in a good place for now, I assured her. I saw him this morning. He's confused and misses you terribly, but he's being cared for. When I'm gone, she swallowed hard. I don't want him lost in the system. He deserves better than that. I promise you, I said, meeting her gaze directly. I won't let that happen. William Montgomery has offered resources through his foundation to ensure Lucas gets the best possible care. Surprise flickered across her face. After what we tried to do to him? Why would he help? Because he understands what it means to love a child, I said simply. And because, despite everything, he's a good man. Tears filled Sophia's eyes. Could I see Lucas? Just once more? I need to explain about the adoption. Tell him how much I wanted him, how much I've always loved him. I need him to know that part was never a lie. I'll see what I can arrange, I promised, my own voice thick with emotion. Sophia, I know this is difficult, but I need to ask, do you have any documentation from when you adopted Lucas? Anything that might help trace his origins? She hesitated, then slowly rose and moved to a small desk in the corner. From a locked drawer, she removed a thin folder. This is everything I have. Most of the records were destroyed in a fire at the group home where Lucas lived before I adopted him. The timing was actually why James thought we could make the Montgomery claim work. The lack of documentation made it easier to substitute his false records. I accepted the folder. a weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. "May I take this? It might help secure Lucas's future." Sophia nodded. "Take it. And Emily, thank you for seeing Lucas, for coming here. You didn't have to do either." As I left the apartment, the folder tucked securely in my bag, I felt the first stirrings of a plan forming. Not a deception like James had orchestrated, but a path forward for a child who deserved far better than the hand life had dealt him. Montgomery was waiting in his office when I arrived, his expression expectant. "How did it go with Sophia?" I recounted our conversation, including the intriguing detail about Lucas's fire dreams and the scant adoption records Sophia had provided. As I spoke, Montgomery's face grew increasingly thoughtful, a tension gathering in his shoulders. "You mentioned a fire," he said when I finished. "A group home fire that destroyed records." "Yes," I confirmed. "Apparently it happened around the time Lucas was adopted, about 6 years ago." Montgomery rose abruptly, moving to his computer. 6 years ago, there was a fire at the East Side Children's Center. 3 children were reported missing afterward, assumed to have perished in the blaze, though no remains were ever found. My heart quickened. Could Lucas have been one of those children? It's possible. Montgomery's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up news archives. The timing aligns with when Alexander would have been about 3 years old, the same age Lucas was when Sophia adopted him. But if Lucas really is Alexander, wouldn't he have the birthmark? The crescent moon shape Sophia mentioned James had planned to explain away? Montgomery's expression grew troubled. Birthmarks can fade, especially in childhood. Or, he hesitated. "There's something I haven't shared widely. After Alexander disappeared, we received an anonymous tip that he might have been targeted because of who he was, the heir to the Montgomery fortune. We've always feared that his kidnappers might have altered his appearance somehow." The implication hung heavy in the air. "You think someone might have removed or disguised the birthmark?" "It's a possibility we've considered," he admitted. "One that's kept me searching all these years, even when children without the mark were brought to my attention." I opened Sophia's folder, spreading the meager documents across Montgomery's desk. There's so little here. Just the final adoption certificate, a medical exam noting Lucas was in good health, but showed signs of smoke inhalation, and this, I held up a small Polaroid photograph of a younger Lucas, looking solemn and frightened in institutional surroundings. Montgomery took the photograph with trembling hands. "His eyes," he murmured. "They're the same as my wife's. The same as mine." "William," I said gently, using his first name without thinking, "I know you want to believe this could be Alexander, but we need to be careful. Lucas has already been through so much." He nodded, visibly composing himself. "You're right, of course. We'll need DNA testing, a thorough investigation of the fire, and the children who went missing. And even if by some miracle Lucas is Alexander, he's been Sophia's son for 6 years. That bond can't be erased or ignored." "No," I agreed. "It can't. But perhaps there's a solution that honors all of these truths." Over the next week, a careful investigation unfolded. Montgomery's resources expedited DNA testing, while his security team delved into the circumstances surrounding the group home fire. I divided my time between teaching, visiting Lucas at the group home, and spending evenings with Margaret, whose unwavering support had become my anchor in the storm. 7 days after my visit with Sophia, I sat in Montgomery's office alongside Detective Phillips, waiting for the results that might change everything. "The DNA results are conclusive," Montgomery announced, his voice carefully controlled as he entered the room. "Lucas Miller is, without question, Alexander Montgomery." Despite having suspected this possibility, the confirmation still sent a shockwave through me. How is this possible? How did he end up in that group home? Detective Phillips cleared his throat. "Our investigation into the fire has uncovered disturbing evidence. It appears the blaze was deliberately set to destroy records and cover up an illegal adoption network. Several children, including Alexander, were abducted and channeled through the facility using falsified paperwork. But why wasn't he recognized? I asked. His disappearance was national news. The birthmark was surgically removed, Montgomery explained, grief and anger mingling in his voice. Our medical experts confirmed that a small scar on Lucas's neck matches the location where Alexander's birthmark would have been, and he was kept isolated until the story faded from headlines. I struggled to process the enormity of what we'd discovered. What happens now? Lucas has no memory of being Alexander. To him, Sophia is his only mother, and she's dying. Montgomery's expression softened. That's why I wanted you here today, Emily. You know Lucas as his teacher. You've come to understand Sophia's situation, and you've shown remarkable compassion and judgment throughout this ordeal. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I don't want to tear Lucas away from the only mother he knows in her final months, but I've waited 7 years to find my son, and now that I have, you need to be part of his life, I finished for him. Yes, his voice was barely above a whisper, but I want to do this right. For Lucas, for Sophia, and yes, for myself. Together, we developed a plan that would prioritize Lucas's emotional well-being above all else. Sophia would be moved to a private medical facility with the best possible care, all charges against her dropped in exchange for her cooperation in identifying others involved in the adoption network. Lucas would continue living with her there, with supervised visits from Montgomery to gradually build a relationship. When I presented the plan to Sophia the following day, tears streamed down her face. He's really giving me this time with Lucas? Even knowing who he really is? He understands that you love Lucas, I explained, and that Lucas loves you. Healing can't begin with another traumatic separation. And after I'm gone? She asked, the question that had driven her to such desperate measures. Lucas will live with his father. With William, I assured her. He'll never want for anything, including people who care about him. I've promised to help with the transition in whatever way I can. Relief washed over Sophia's features. Thank you, she whispered, for giving us this ending. It's more than I deserve. It's exactly what Lucas deserves, I corrected gently. A future with both the mother who raised him and the father who never stopped looking for him. Spring bloomed across the city as Lucas's extraordinary story unfolded in careful, measured steps. I took a leave of absence from teaching to help facilitate his transition, becoming the bridge between his past and future. Sophia's health declined rapidly, despite the excellent care, but she found peace in knowing Lucas would be loved and protected after she was gone. On a warm May evening, 3 months after discovering James's scheme, I stood beside Lucas as he said goodbye to the woman who had been his mother in every way that mattered. Sophia's final words to him were of love and reassurance, telling him it was okay to embrace his new family, his new identity, his new life. She slipped away peacefully that night, with Lucas holding one hand and me holding the other. When it was over, I took him to the hospital garden where William Montgomery waited, uncertainty and hope battling in his expression. Lucas, I said gently, do you remember what your mom told you? About your birth family? He nodded solemnly. That they've been looking for me for a very long time. That they never stopped loving me or trying to find me. His eyes, so like Montgomery's, shifted to the man standing nearby. Is that him? Is that my birth father? Yes, I confirmed. His name is William Montgomery, and he has waited 7 years to meet you. Lucas studied the man for a long moment, then slipped his small hand into mine. Will you stay with me while I talk to him? For as long as you need, I promised. That conversation in the garden was the first of many as Lucas gradually came to understand his extraordinary story. The transition wasn't without challenges. Nightmares returned, questions arose that had no easy answers. Grief for Sophia mingled with curiosity about the family he'd lost and found again. Through it all, I remained a constant presence, helping Lucas navigate his complicated emotions while processing my own. The divorce from James proceeded without contest. He was facing multiple fraud charges with substantial evidence against him. Margaret insisted I continue living with her, providing stability I desperately needed while building a new life. Summer arrived, bringing with it unexpected developments. Montgomery offered me a position with his foundation, overseeing programs for children who had experienced trauma and displacement. The work spoke to my heart, allowing me to help others while healing myself. More surprising was the friendship that developed between Montgomery and me. Two people united initially by deception, but connected now by our shared commitment to Lucas's well-being. As weeks turned to months, that friendship deepened into something neither of us had anticipated. It was Lucas who pointed it out first, with the straightforward perception of childhood. "You look at Emily the way people look at each other in movies," he informed his father one evening as the three of us shared dinner on Montgomery's terrace. "When they're in love, but don't know it yet." Montgomery had choked on his water, while I felt heat rush to my face. But the observation, once voiced, couldn't be unheard or denied. There was something growing between us, something careful and genuine that had nothing to do with the chaos that had brought us together, and everything to do with who we had proven ourselves to be through that chaos. On the one-year anniversary of the day, I found Sophia's note in the trash. William proposed, not with grand gestures, but with honest words on a quiet evening walk through the botanical gardens. Lucas, who had been in on the secret, waited anxiously at home with Margaret for our return. "She said yes," William announced as we entered, his face alight with joy that made him look years younger. Lucas whooped with delight while Margaret embraced me, whispering, "Richard would have loved you as a daughter-in-law. I'm so glad I finally get to have you as one, even if through a different son." Our wedding was small and intimate, held in Montgomery's, now our, garden, with Lucas proudly serving as best man. Margaret sat in the front row, beside the empty chair left symbolically for Sophia, whose sacrifice and love for Lucas had made this new family possible in an unexpected way. As for James, we learned he had accepted a plea deal, receiving a 10-year sentence for fraud and other charges. The man I had once loved and the life we had shared seemed like a distant dream now, not forgotten, but transformed into stepping stones that had led me to where I truly belonged. Life settled into new rhythms. Lucas thrived in his father's home, his resilient spirit healing as he embraced his dual identity. The son of Sophia, who had loved him through hardship, and the son of William who had searched for him without ceasing. Regular visits to Sophia's grave kept her memory alive, while family therapy helped all of us navigate the complex emotions of our unusual situation. On a bright autumn afternoon, 2 years after that fateful discovery, I stood with William in the hospital room, watching as he held our newborn daughter for the first time. We had named her Sophie Margaret, honoring the two women whose courage and love had shaped our journey. Lucas peered at his baby sister with wonder, gently touching her tiny hand. "She has Mom's nose," he observed, referring to Sophia in the way he always did now, with love undiminished by his understanding of their non-biological connection. "And your eyes," William added, smiling at his son. "The Montgomery eyes." As I watched my family, this miraculous, blended creation born from tragedy and deception, but transformed by truth and love, I felt a sense of completion I had never thought possible in those dark days a year ago. The note that had changed everything had set in motion not just the unraveling of lies, but the weaving together of truths far more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. What began with betrayal had culminated in belonging. What started with loss had blossomed into love multiplied. And in that hospital room, surrounded by the family we had built from broken pieces, I understood that sometimes the most devastating discoveries can lead to the most precious revelations, if we have the courage to follow truth wherever it leads, and the wisdom to recognize the gifts hidden within our greatest sorrows. Lucas looked up at me, his smile reflecting the journey we had traveled together. "We're all exactly where we're supposed to be now," he said, with the simple certainty of childhood. "Aren't we, Mom?" "Yes," I answered, my heart full to overflowing as William's arm wrapped around my shoulders, our daughter nestled between us, and Lucas's hand held firmly in mine. We're exactly where we're supposed to be. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.